Welcome to part 8 of this video series that describes making a steam test plant. This video covers making the feed water tank. The tank will store feed water that can be pumped into the boiler during operation to maintain the water level. Making the tank started with cutting a piece of 4-inch brass tube to 6 inches long. I usually use copper tube for tanks, however, I could not get thin-walled copper tube, so I went with brass instead. I cut a piece of 1/8-inch brass plate to 4.5 inches and squared it off in the mill. I then center punched the plate in its center. This clip shows the plate in the 4-jaw chuck on the lathe. I used a dead center in a live center so that I could center the plate. The DTI is running on the dead center. I used a parting tool to cut a recess in the brass plate. The recess forms a well that solder will flow into when I soft solder the tube to the base. Cutting the recess is a tedious process as the plate chatters. To overcome this, I took things slowly and used small cuts. This photo shows the feed water tank so far. The tube has been cut to length and the base recessed so the tube fits into it. This photo shows setting the tube in the mill so that it is centered. To find the center on the y-axis, a rule was placed under the center drill and the axis adjusted until the rule was level. When the rule is level, the tube was centered. This clip shows one of the holes for the sight glass bushes being center drilled. Next, I opened up the hole to 1/4 inch. Finally, I drilled the hole 3/8 inch. This process was repeated for both the sight glass bushes. I used the same process to drill the hole for the water outlet bush. The only difference was that the hole was drilled 7/16 inch. Making the bushes was a straightforward turning job. I used round phosphor bronze bar stock and turned it to dimension. This speeded up clip shows the process. I then parted off the bushes to length. I tapped holes in the bushes. The sight glass bushes were drilled with a number 5 drill and tapped 1/4 inch 40 threads per inch. The water outlet bush was drilled with a letter S drill and tapped 3/8 inch 32 threads per inch. With the bushes complete, I moved on to completing the base. This clip shows drilling the mounting holes for the feed water tank. I drilled the holes with a number 27 drill, which is clearance size for the wood screws I'll be using. I blew the corners of the base and used a washer to mark an arc so that I could round the corners of the base. Next, I rounded the corners of the base on the sander. I repeated this process for all 4 corners of the base. I cleaned around the holes that the bushes will solder into, and around the bottom of the tube with a Scotch-Brite wheel in the Dremel. This removed any burrs and prepared the tube for soldering. I then pickled all the parts in preparation for soldering. Next, I applied solder paste on the inside of the tube. I used a liberal amount of paste to ensure that it flowed into the recess I machined in the base earlier. I centered the tube in the recess in the base and heated it with a blowtorch. I gradually warmed up the tube until I could see solder flowing into the recess. I used some plumber's solder to fill in any gaps. This process took a little time, but eventually I got a relatively even fill of solder in the recess. I wasn't too worried about excess solder as this will be cleaned off later. This clip shows the sight glass bushes being soldered into position on the tank. After soldering, I plugged the bushes and leak tested the tank by filling it with water and leaving it for a while. Soldering had been successful as there were no leaks from the base or bush soldered joints. This clip shows cleaning the tank in preparation for painting. I used a Scotch Brite wheel to clean off any excess solder and scratch the surfaces of the tank so the paint has something to key to. Here's the tank in the spray booth getting a coat of acid etch primer. I put 2 coats of primer on the tank, leaving it for 12 hours between coats and 24 hours before starting to put top coats on the tank. While the paint was drying, I made the lid for the tank. This clip shows a step being machined on the lid. Prior to this, I had marked out the lid, drilled a 1/4-inch hole in the center of the lid, roughly cut the lid on the band saw, set it up in a mandrel on the lathe, and turned the rim of the lid to size. The step will locate the lid on the tank. This sequence of photos shows the knob for the lid being made. First, I turned down a piece of hex bar down to size. Next, I turned the bar to a 1/4 inch for a length of 3/8 inch. I then threaded the bar a 1/4 inch 20 threads per inch. Finally, I parted of the knob and shaped the profile with files. This photo shows the finished lid on the tank, which was in the process of being painted. So, that's the feed water tank for the steam plant completed. I'd like to give a big shout out to Keith Appleton as I used many of his techniques while making the feed water tank in this video. I'll put a link to Keith's YouTube channel in the description below. Thank you for watching this video. Please like and subscribe to support my channel. Thank you.